have some who could not be here today. So we are going to get started. I'm going to kind of take the lead first and talk you guys through the plan block by block, because as you may have heard us talking earlier, the more this process goes on, the more DESE has really clarified for us what they are looking for and what needs to be in that plan. If you are using our Arkansas River K-6 for your seats, if you're purchasing seats from them, and that's who we're recommending because we didn't have enough participation to stand up and arch forward K-6. If you're using those, then you're going to be super happy because you're going to get to do a lot of copying and pasting today. But even if you're not using that program, if you're standing up your own program, it's going to help you to see what kind of language really needs to be in that plan, because the one that we're presenting to you today has already had feedback from DESE several times. And so that helps us to just know they've already started that. So hopefully we're making that process even easier for you. Same thing with Virtual Arkansas 712. If you're using Virtual Arkansas, again, that part has been vetted several times by DESE. We've had feedback. We have corrected. Virtual Arkansas has done a fabulous job really working on that, helping to make sure that we're meeting what they need. So we're hoping that we're making this process even easier for you guys, because we've tried to do a lot of that vetting on the front end versus 6 weeks ago when we were coming at you with, here's a template that's kind of our best guess, okay? So I've got Rachel Shell here today. Rachel, you got anything you want to say before we get started?
Yes. Hey, good morning, everybody. I've talked to all of you so many times about this. I just wanted to let you know, just to kind of back up what Julie is saying, is all the work that you've been doing. I think everybody here has been doing a lot of focus on, there's like two big pieces in this plan. And this is kind of how I've had to break down and think about this plan. There's the curriculum side, which is like, how are we going to reach the students? How are we going to deliver the content to them? And then there's the school support side. So I think most everybody here is really, like, what I know I've talked with you on is thinking through the process of what that school support side is. And I will say that what I'm really, really proud of is we have just pulled so many people from the state together, and the template that we're going to show you today takes care of that curriculum side. So if you're using Arkansas River, if you're using Virtual Arkansas, it's there, the curriculum piece. If you're not, that wording is spot on. It goes back and it says, we're asking for this waiver because according to this law, this is this. I mean, it is just so, it's going to cover you on that. We also have a lot of clarifying language around the waivers. And so this template that we're going to walk you through is going to really help you just kind of solidify that curriculum side. The piece that you're still going to have to go back and add in is, what does that school support side look like? And so what I always encourage everybody when I talk to y'all to do is think, and you'll see in the language, the highlighted areas that you go and put in your school support information. I just want you to think about, what are the 1 or 2 steps we need to take with the virtual students that just transitions them right into the same process that we use for our on-site students, So those 1 or 2 steps may include, who's going to reach out over Zoom and have a virtual conference with the family if we think that this student needs a tier 2 or tier 3 intervention, and then once you have that conference, how do you put that student into your same support system that you're using for your on-campus students? So don't reinvent the wheel, just add those couple of steps for every support that rolls them right into what you already have. Not only is that a time saver, it's also a resource saver. It's going to keep you from having to bring in new people or new tools to do what you're already doing on campus. So those are kind of my big takeaways. When we've broken down and looked at the feedback that we've received from DESE on other plans, I think that's kind of the big piece. And yes, Julie put in chat, I am your Arkansas River Consortium. So if you are using Arkansas River for K-6, first of all, make sure that I know that I have seats saved for you. I have emailed all superintendents. And if you want to double check with me, just send me an email and let me know. But what we're doing, since Arkansas River is going to be handling the K-6 side, I'll be your direct point of contact. So any questions you have, training you need, anything you need, call me first, and I will work with Kathy Swan, the director of Arkansas River, to get all that coordinated. I'm fortunate. I worked for Kathy Swan starting in 2014, so we have a great relationship. So this works out really well for everybody involved. So, all right, but that's enough about that. I'm going to turn it over to Karen Norton. She's here with us to help out. Karen, anything you want to say?
No, I think you did a great job. You and Julie both just kind of reiterating what we've done and those pieces that the districts will be responsible for in the feedback that we've received from the state. That's the part that is really important, to make sure that we outline exactly how we're going to support students in the area of dyslexia and special ed and ESL, but also how you're going to support teachers. You know, if they're doing if they're pulling in virtual kids into special ed, how are you going to give them time to plan for that? So I just really want to reiterate what Rachel said about that support piece, because that's where we're really seeing the most feedback. So I'm excited to be here as a learner and as a support.
Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started. We are spending a lot of time right now reading digital plans, and so I feel like that's been helpful because we're getting so much better at being able to just filter down to what they're looking for. The other thing I want to preface this with is, when you create a digital plan, regardless of what program you use, and you submit that to DESE, one of the things that they want us to understand is this is not them looking at your plan saying, you have a good plan or you have a bad plan. This is them looking at your plan and saying, you are applying for waivers, which basically tell you you don't have to follow what the law says, and they have to make sure that your plan for going around that law is tight, because they're going to turn around and they're going to have that conversation with the state board. Okay, so I don't want anybody to think if your plan gets a lot of feedback, if we're having to make a lot of corrections, that DESE is saying you have a bad plan, because that's not it at all. They're making sure that we're meeting the letter of the law so that we can feel confident about putting these waivers in place. Okay. The other thing that I want to start with is May the 1st. You've heard us say that over and over again. That's the deadline. So a little bit more about that deadline, and Rachel has done some work here to help us get clarification on that. If you for sure know that you are going to have that virtual program and you want to pursue this path, you have to submit a plan by May the 1st. Now, you may submit a plan on May the 1st, and that's the first time that you've submitted anything to them. That's good. Okay. There will still be a period where they will do some of that feedback, giving you corrections, things that you can go back. So don't think that you have to submit today so that you have time to get feedback and get it fixed before the May 1st. That's not it. We're just telling you, you have to do an initial submission by May the 1st. Anybody who submits at that point goes on their radar as, we're wanting to have a virtual option, we're wanting to do some sort of digital plan, and they will work with us on that. If you don't submit anything by May the 1st, then they're going to assume that you are not looking at a digital option for this next school year. Okay, so just to clarify that for you guys.
And I do want to make sure that everyone is aware, after you submit May 1st and they give you feedback, you do need to try to resubmit before the end of June, because July 1st will start our new year. So just kind of make a plan once you get that feedback from the like, okay, we got to resubmit. And you may, and I don't think the feedback is really good, but just I'm super cautious about this stuff. I would make a plan like, we're going to submit again by the end of May, and then we'll have time in June to resubmit if it got kicked back again. But just as you're planning and you're getting this on your calendar, submit May 1st, try to get it submitted before the end of May. And then that still gives you a month to resubmit if it gets kicked back a second time.
And I will tell you also that right now DESE has about 80 plans that they were reviewing, and they said that they are working on a 5-day turnaround. So when you submit your plan, their goal is to get you feedback within 5 days. It may get a little bit longer than that when they have a whole bunch of plans start coming in, because they said they were expecting about 100 more. But they've really streamlined that process. So, you know, we had a district in our region that submitted Monday, and they had feedback by Tuesday. Okay, so it was a 24-hour turnaround on that. They didn't have a whole lot of feedback, which was excellent. That shows the work that they had done going in prior to submission. And so they are resubmitting today based on that feedback. So we've been able to work that loop pretty quickly. In terms of us working with you, if you submit your plan to us and you want feedback from us, we're trying to do that as quickly as possible. Right now, it's about 24 hours. Depending on if we have a bunch of them, then it may take a little bit longer, but we are working around the clock trying to get that to you as well. So we are going to take a look at this template, and we will share this with you at the end. Not going to share it with you right now because I'm pretty sure you would be busy copying and pasting. And so I want you to hear what I'm going to say first, and I will go through it pretty quickly unless you guys have questions. And then we'll just kind of open it up to you to be able to really ask us, how do I do this, and specific questions that you might have. So on this template, the first page is your waivers, and you can see here that if you are fully going with Arkansas River K-6 and Virtual Arkansas 712, this is how this plan is written, okay? And so any modification you need to do, just think about what part of that am I doing. If you're using both of those options, you can see that they're not applying for an attendance waiver, and so it just says NA. The one thing that I want you to think about with the waivers is you want to be very clear if you are applying for this waiver or not. So take a look at class size. That's the next one. In the very first sentence says, we are not requesting additional waivers for class size. That's all they need to know. There's some information there to help them know why we're not asking for that. But really, it's that sentence. So you need to make sure at the beginning of each of those boxes, you're either putting an NA, not applicable here, because they're coming back with feedback that says, are you applying for this waiver or not? Make it as clear as possible for them. Same thing with teaching load, not requesting additional waivers for teaching load, because virtual teachers already have some flexibility with that. Going down, 6-hour instructional day. You see, yes, we are requesting this waiver. And then there's just a little bit of information as to why, because in that justification, you have to talk about how we will use that waiver or why we need that waiver. So that information justification is there. Clock hours, that one not being requested here. And then recess, not requesting a recess waiver because they are going to make that part of every virtual student's daily schedule.
Now, Julie, let me jump in and talk about the recess a little bit. So
Okay.
we wrote that in this way because Arkansas River, if you were doing the Arkansas River program for K-6, those students get more of a concrete schedule because of that age. And so recess is built in, and I mean, they're virtual students, so, it's going to be up to the parent to make them go do recess, but it's built into that daily schedule. If you are using Virtual Arkansas for 712, make sure you communicate with Virtual Arkansas that you do want to have that recess built in for 7-8, grade 7-8. It's part of that wheel program they're doing. If you are doing 9-12, you'll need to work with Virtual Arkansas to get the PE course that they offer, and that will cover that recess piece. But just be aware, make sure when you're working with Virtual Arkansas that you do have that in place, or you at least have in your schedule for students that there is a time for recess. If you are not going to do that, then you will need to ask for a recess waiver. But we're just encouraging schools to just make sure that you're putting in their schedule, you're giving them time for PE or, other recess things, and just make sure you work with Virtual Arkansas, especially on that. Like I said, the Arkansas River, that will be included. Debbie asked, question about attendance. Do we have to have a daily attendance policy? So on this, you do need to have, yes, you do need to have a daily attendance policy. Now, you can work with us, or you will have to figure out what that looks like for virtual students. So that's going to be up to every school to determine. if you're using Arkansas River or Virtual Arkansas, they have a whole system which is laid out below where those teachers are going to communicate to your campus coordinator the attendance of those students, what they did, if they logged in, if they haven't logged in. So you're going to get that information. Then what you as the school have to decide is what counts for attendance. So when you're getting that information from Arkansas River and Virtual Arkansas, how do you use that to count attendance there? If you're not using those programs, it's the same thing. Just how are you going to take attendance? If you're going to do something daily, you do not need a waiver. But if you're going to do more of like, we're going to take attendance on a weekly basis, you will need to ask for an attendance waiver. Does that make sense?
You know, the courses are going to be asynchronous. They're going to be self-paced. And so it's not, you know, you might do your lessons on Sunday. So I guess my question was, do I need to have some type of daily, or can I have something totally different?
If you don't want to do a daily attendance policy for virtual students, then ask for the waiver and just explain that if what you just told us is asynchronous, it gives them the flexibility, because we found in our surveys that's the needs for the population we're serving. And you're not using these programs, so yes, you would do that. Everybody else, if you're using the Arkansas Virtual or Arkansas River program, you do not have to ask for an attendance waiver unless you do want a separate policy where you're not taking attendance daily for those virtual students. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, thank you, Rachel. Yeah, the law says that you have a daily log, and so if you're not daily, you do need to go back, and it's okay to do it weekly. You just have to make sure that you explain how you're going to do that. If you're going to take, you know, progressing in the course, engaging in the course a certain amount of time, however that's going to look for you. Okay, so once we get past the waivers, then we're into the application, and you can see there's a lot of information here. The key thing that I want to tell you about this is what they keep coming back to with the feedback is you didn't answer this part of the question. Okay, so that's when I say really look at that question to ensure that the answer that you have over there has addressed each part of the question. It's just like we teach our kids. You got to answer all the parts of the question. And also, I would recommend use their words. So in this box in particular, what are the ways that students and teachers are going to interact with their digital content? You want to use words synchronous, asynchronous. We're going to use a combination of the two, but you have to be able to use those words and you have to be consistent with that vocabulary. Just like on the other templates we've shown you, the highlighted parts mean you need to take a look here. You need to add something. So you can see, you know, at the top, this one, you're going to add your district name, add the name of your school's academy or virtual option, whatever you want to call that. Notice that in here, we've really tried to break down K-6 information. All of that answer is there. And then as you continue, it's a long answer. You've got a place at the end of that K-6 section for you to add anything particular to your district. So you're going to see things in there like there's going to be synchronous Zooms offered every week. The district can say our students have to attend so many of those. So you would add those specific things. If you want to differentiate between K2 and 3-6, different expectations that you might have. I know a lot of people in terms of interventions, phonics, those types of things, especially looking at science of reading practices for the lower elementary, might want to add something here. Okay, so what you're going to want to do is if you're doing Arkansas River K-6, you first want to read that information, how they've answered that question. Their answer is great. You just want to add in anything that might be specific to your program, your students who are taking that virtual option. The same is true for 7-12. Virtual Arkansas information is there. On this one, just add, are we going to add some kind of requirement for them to attend their Zoom sessions? Virtual Arkansas doesn't require those. They offer them, and kids can always request additional, but it's up to the district if you want to say, my students will have to attend this many per week. Any questions on that box? It's all about the interaction. Okay, then I'm going to keep going. Next box is all about the delivery approach. Okay, and you see that terminology there. Are we going to utilize virtual online and remote distance, or are we having a blended approach? So you want to explain however you're going to do that in your district. You see there, Arkansas River information is first, fill in your name. And then it says on-site face-to-face events list. So for the K-6 students, particularly with Arkansas River, if there are things that you want to open up for your virtual students to be able to attend, maybe you have a career fair, maybe you have different activities that you would say, you know what, those kids, that might be a really good opportunity for them still to be a part of our on-site instruction, even though they're not coming to school every single day. You can add a list there of events that students would have access to. It doesn't have to be extensive. It could just be a couple of things, but this really helps with that equity piece to help to show how this is still an equitable program. This is still a student in my school district. They will have access to these things. 712, a little bit of information there about how they interact. Any questions on that part?
Julie, can I ask a question about equity?
Yes.
Because I'm getting conflicting information about this. Now, understand, we're just doing this for high school. This is just 9-12 is what we're doing. I've seen some schools and meetings, they're talking about being in their program as far as equity. You have to meet certain requirements. Like if you missed the state exam last year, or you have failed a class, or you were unsuccessful in this virtual program this year, you can't be a part next year. Then I've heard people say, well, you can't do that. You can't limit. If you open up the program, you have to have, everybody has to have the opportunity. So, you know, when you mentioned equity, I know this may not be the time to ask that, but what is the right answer? Can we limit, or do we, if we have it, do we have to allow everyone, even if we know they're not going to be successful?
From what we have heard in all those discussions, because that's a question many people have, you can make decisions about kids who would be a good fit or not for your virtual program based on their specific experience. So let's say you look at their engagement for this year. Did they participate? Did they interact in their courses if they were virtual? Did they do like they were supposed to do? Because if you have that history of that student not doing that, then that's something specific to that student where you can say, okay, so let's talk about this. This is your history. That may be that limiting factor. What you can't do is say, you have an IEP, therefore you can't be in our virtual school. And we all know that part.
Oh,
And
right.
Julie,
Yeah, I'm just talking about, I've got students who did not do any work or very little. They have failed, you know, and I've got IEP and those that are not IEP, but they want to be in a digital program next year. They're already in jeopardy of not graduating. And I want to say no. So the answer is yes. If I've got this passed, if I have all this documentation, then I'm okay to say no. That's not your best interest.
You need
Debbie,
a criteria. Like
yeah, I was going to
a
say,
rubric.
here's where the equity piece comes in, is you have to make sure that you show that what you're holding one student to, the standards you're holding one student to, is the same for the next student. Because you don't want to be in a situation where one student is allowed to continue and one is not, because you're not using a criteria or an equitable process to determine that. So that's what it is. And then and Dr. Hoffman and I have talked a lot about this. You definitely want to vet it with your legal team, make sure that they're behind that. But if you can come in and show that we have a process, and we've talked a lot about checklists, rubrics, anything you can identify, that's what, when we talk about equity, that's what they're talking about.
So as long as I have a set criteria and that everyone has to follow that same set of criteria, I'm good.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
And I put a sample rubric there in the chat, one that has been shared many times by Bentonville. just maybe a place to start, but you know, just like anything else, you want to be sure you have that process and you're using that equitably with all students. Okay, so delivery approach, I'm going to keep going. So this is the dual role question. If you're going with Arkansas River and Virtual Arkansas, those teachers will be handling your core instruction. Okay, so this question is all about, will teachers have a dual role? So one of the things that we've done here is we know that if you are using these programs, that there are still things that are on the district where teachers would have to have a dual role, such as dyslexia interventions, special ed, students who have to have that resource time, or you know, whatever their IEP says, those have to be district teachers providing that in collaboration with the Virtual Arkansas and the Arkansas River teachers. So we're going to address that part in those specific boxes. If you have addressed this in your plan in every single box, you're fine to do that. But there are some specific things that they're asking for. And what we've learned is as they are reviewing these plans, they have different teams looking at those. So the dyslexia team goes in, they're really specifically looking at that dyslexia question. So that's where we want to be sure that we address the dual role. And my dyslexia interventionist, yes, half a day they're teaching on-site students, but maybe half a day they're teaching dyslexia interventions for remote kids. You just have to explain that in there. So if you've put it in every box, it's not wrong. But knowing their process, what I'm recommending from this point forward is you can just put that in the dyslexia box. You can put that in the special ed box as we keep going down, and you should be fine because that's where those teams are looking for that information. So dual role, you see the information is addressed there. A few things for you to add down here, especially with Virtual Arkansas and those facilitators, because that is going with that core program. Depending on who you use as a facilitator, if you're using a certified teacher, then you'll want to explain that there. And any of this highlighted information, if it doesn't apply to you, feel free to delete. Okay, just notes for you. Okay, next part, expectations for teacher instruction, interaction, and frequency with virtual students. All of that is there for your core programs. Again, for your specialized programs, we'll address it in those specific boxes. Anytime you see there's no highlights in there, that means you're good. If those are the programs you're using, you don't have to add anything else. In terms of waivers, so you've got two boxes here for these waivers. Both of these, we didn't request these waivers if you're using Arkansas Virtual and Virtual Arkansas, and so you can just copy this information and it very clearly says we're not requesting these, therefore we don't have to really add any other information there.
So this is a really good point. If you're not using Arkansas Virtual or Virtual Arkansas, the way this is written is really, really great guidance. This is where it's pulling back to specific laws, policies, this is what DESE is looking for. So if you are going to request a waiver, then you can see how they wrote it here, and you can model this when you're explaining why you're requesting that waiver, or if you are not requesting the waiver, this can help guide you. So these sections are written really well, and that's going to help you a lot when you're doing your plan to kind of look at how that's done.
Okay, thank you, Rachel. So next section is technology platforms. This one is probably one of the easier parts of this plan to write because it's just listing out those things that you're doing. The schools that we've worked with the one thing that I will tell them is you don't want to give them just a list of here are all the programs we're going to use digitally. If you're going to list some programs, you need to go ahead and explain how you're using it and what part it's going to be fitting for you in terms of that curriculum. So if you are using these programs, the information is already there. You're just adding your name at the top here in terms of the learning management system and the content management system. As I continue going down, digital content, all of that information is included here for those programs. If you are not using these programs, this is where I say you're going to want to be pretty extensive in how you explain how you're using that. Also, I would make sure that I understand that I really explain to them that providing digital content that's already created is a way the district is supporting the teacher. For example, if we have face-to-face programs that we're using and we're going to set up our own digital program, and that program also has a digital component that they sell, that might be something you might want to look at. The one I talked to a district about yesterday is Wit and Wisdom. That's a literacy curriculum that many people are using, K-5, K-6. They have an on-site program, but they also have a digital component. It's an extra cost for purchase, but if that is something that you're already using and you're standing up your own program, it's worth the money because that's a way you're supporting that teacher and they're not having to build out all that content. So you can see we've got a really extensive explanation here. So just be sure that you're fully explaining that and what parts you're using for those different areas. The video communication question, most are using Zoom or Google Meet. So you see all that information is there. Both of these programs are utilizing Zoom. Again, if you're also using Zoom, you can pick up that wording and it's already done for you and it's already had some feedback. So it's written the way that DESE is looking for that to be written. Okay, Rachel, will you talk a little bit about this box, the technology access, because this is one that the district will have to answer.
Yes, so this is one, if you go to your tech coordinator or have your tech coordinator reach out to me when we met, before spring break, was it that long ago? Before or after spring break, I met with your tech coordinators and we talked about this. They should be aware if they were at that meeting and I can help them. Basically, all you want to do here is talk about what you have in place to allow students to have access to internet. And I know all of you here are doing something. So either you have hotspots that you are providing to students, you're already giving those students Chromebooks or laptops that they take home. You are providing community access, like Arch Board has internet in the parking lot that's available for students to use if needed. So whatever you're doing that allows students to have access, you want to write that here. You do want to make sure in your plan, it is on the burden of the school to provide those students, or it's expected that students are provided with devices and internet connectivity if they don't have something at their own home. And I think that that's something that's been made clear over the past couple of years. So just make sure you explain how you're going to do that and what you're already doing. Most of you are already doing this anyway.
Okay. Any questions about the technology section? All right, y'all are good. So now we're going on to the student support section. So this is one where you're going to need to add some things. And the thing I always tell you is think about what you're already doing for your on-site kids and think about how you can make that equitable for those virtual students. These two programs have some things already built in, but you may have some additional things that you want to do in terms of meeting the needs, the full needs of your students, the whole child. So again, adding some information. We are recommending that you go ahead and link your health and wellness plan for your district. Understand that there are some links up here that are hyperlinked. I'll try to go back to one where if you click on it, it's going to come to that link. Those are mostly for DESE, and so you don't have to worry about that. When it comes to putting, though, your own links in here, like your health and wellness plan, you're going to need to go ahead and copy the URL. When you get to LEA Insights and you begin copying all of this information into that platform, it doesn't really take those links. So it's not going to matter with the stuff that's already linked in here. You can leave it alone. It's fine. But when it's time for you to link something that we're recommending in here, go ahead and put the URL, just grab it from that top bar and copy it right there so that they can go back and view that. Information is spelled out K-6 and 712, how they will be doing that. If there's anything else specific you want to add in there, feel free, but you don't have to on that one. Monitoring the academic and student engagement in that virtual setting, all the information there about how that will happen with those two programs. But as we continue to go down, now you've got some places you need to add. Where you see that green there, I highlighted in a different color where we've had some feedback on previous plans where these are specific things that they asked about. So you've got how Arkansas River is going to handle that for K-6. You need to go in and add the district piece. If you have a virtual coordinator in your district who's going to be overseeing all of that, this is the part where you're going to want to really explain that. What are their processes going to be? How are we going to monitor these students on a daily and a weekly basis? And then how are we going to plug in those additional supports when we see a student is struggling with engagement? What they specifically said in the feedback was, we really want you to think about what kinds of interventions, supports you will provide to those students before you just drop them from that program. You know, we know that's one of those things that if after a certain amount of time you have not engaged, you have not done what you needed to do in this virtual program, we're going to want to recommend that you come back to on-site learning, but not just, you know, the first week that you don't engage, that automatically you're out, you're back on that campus. They're going to want you to list some of those supports that you have, to talk about what's that process and what will it look like. Same is true for 712. Okay. So next one, academic response to intervention. What are we doing when students are actually struggling with the content? So with these two questions, as much as possible, think about separating out. Student engagement is like attendance or engaging in our courses. That's one issue. We know we've seen that a ton with virtual students this year, but then let's take our regular RTI process where we're thinking about content. I'm struggling with the content I don't understand. Here's the information on that part.
So Julie, I want to kind of explain a little bit here. If you've used Virtual Arkansas and you are familiar with their system and the way they do things, they have a facilitator that works directly with the teacher. So you may have multiple students and there's a facilitator assigned to 20 or 30 students, and each student might be taking a different class, but that facilitator is in direct contact with each one of those teachers and monitors the progress of each student. That facilitator is that point of contact that we keep referring to in the digital learning plan. The Arkansas River K-6 program will have some similar setup. So they call their person their campus coordinator, but that's their whole role, is to monitor and just stay in touch with what's going on with those students and being that lifeline between those students who are not on campus and then the Arkansas virtual program. So when you are answering the academic response to intervention plan and the section above, that is that facilitator / campus coordinator is going to be that key role. And that's where I was saying at the beginning, think through what are the steps that campus coordinator would take, that facilitator would take to identify what do they need to do, then who do they pull in, and how do you roll that into your process that you're doing in school. So I hope that that's all starting to make sense with how you do things, and then how this kind of just plugs into what you're already doing.
Mm-hmm. And on that engagement piece, you've got that part that says, talk about how you're going to do this as a district. You don't have this on this RTI piece, and that's because it's going to come in that special ed, dyslexia, because when we're talking about those tier 2 and tier 3 interventions, that's typically what we're looking at. Okay, next one, formative assessment. So one of the things to think about here is they've explained in both programs how those students will be formatively assessed with their core content that they're doing. But one of the things for you to think about is, what are those formative or even interim assessments that we currently give in our district? And is that something that we would want our virtual students to also be able to take? For many of the plans that I've seen, they are still requiring them to take those interim assessments, whether it's MAP, whether it's ACT Aspire. We know ACT Aspire interims will go away next year, so don't put that in your plan. But whatever interim assessment that they're using, that is kind of that outside indicator that helps you to really be able to gauge progress. It's one thing to look at progress within a virtual program and see what they're doing, but then it may be helpful for you to say, you know, when I go back and I look at my NWEA or my MAP scores, I'm seeing that my virtual kids are here, but my on-site kids are here. It's just giving you that way to compare those. So if you decide that you want them to engage in that, then this part is right here for you so that you can explain that fully in how you would have them to do that. Whether they're on site, whether they're given virtually, however you choose to do that, you just need to do that for K-6 and also for 712 if your expectation would be that as well. Okay, so now we're to the dyslexia box. With dyslexia, I know I've sent you some feedback because this is one of the first areas that we really started getting some kickback on plans. This has all been carefully vetted. And so as closely as you can stay to this as possible, I would encourage you to do that. you can see that the very first statement that you have there is the district will ensure that all components of the dyslexia and literacy plan are in place for virtual students and will update the plan to include virtual students as appropriate. That's talking about updating your district dyslexia plan. We need to make sure that it's also reflecting virtual students. So that statement that you see up there is going to need to be at the top of each of these boxes. Just copy it as is, that the district will ensure that everything is being met, the laws, the guidelines, the rules, the regs, all of those things are going to be met by the district. Because again, when we're asking for waivers, that's the primary concern, is we have to make sure that we're still meeting what the letter of the law is saying, even though we might go about meeting that differently. Information is here, step by step, taking you through exactly how you need to be wording that. This is how that program will run through, especially with our K-2 students, knowing that we have so many components in the law that have to be met there. So screening is in there. Who will give those screeners, how that's all going to happen with Arkansas Virtual. When we get to parent communication, we see how the virtual teachers will communicate. You've got a part to add there about how the district will add that. How will they communicate with parents regarding their level 2 screening in terms of dyslexia? Then we go through and we talk about the intervention piece. So information is there about how those will be provided. Again, here's where you're going to see all that information district specific in terms of how will we do this, because we all know you use different dyslexia programs for your interventions. So that will be on the district in terms of providing that. So you're going to need to very carefully answer this question. The other thing is thinking about that dual role. You heard me talk about that earlier. If you have it there, great. I would say if you already have it in that box, go ahead and just copy and paste what you have there again in this box, because this is where they're going to look for that information. Likely your district dyslexia person will be serving a dual role. They will see on-site students, but they will also have virtual students that they're seeing. So be very clear about how that's going to work and how you're providing enough support for them. Talk about the content here in terms of how they're going to do that. What PD will you provide for that dyslexia intervention so that they understand how to deliver those services digitally? Most are doing this through Zoom synchronously, but they are going to have to go back and create some of those materials for kids to be able to manipulate digitally. So just be very clear in terms of how you will do that. In terms of student expectations, how will you handle attendance, participation, and parent commitment to that? We know we have to implement those dyslexia interventions with fidelity. So how are we going to go about doing that with our students? What happens if they don't attend a session? How are we going to make that up? Very clear on how all of that will be handled. The accessibility part, you can copy and paste that. Lots of great things in Edgenuity that they'll be using that would meet that. You've got the virtual Arkansas information for 712 there as well. And so you've got a place where you can put your own statement for that. And then also we're recommending that you go ahead and upload your district dyslexia and literacy plan and make sure that it addresses virtual students, that you've gone back and you've updated that to meet their needs. Okay, any questions about dyslexia? Okay, I'm going to keep going. GT, very similar. The wording is there. It's been vetted. And so just taking a look at where those highlights are. For K2, the teacher will provide that enrichment. For 3-6 identified students, you've got your information there. And then with 712 Virtual Arkansas, all teachers have been trained and are doing the secondary course content option. And so that information is there that needs to be included. The bottom part there, they've worked on some wording about AP courses, concurrent credit courses. So you need to go back and fill in who those would be available to in your district, whether you're doing 912, 712, however you want to handle that. And then again, go ahead and link your district program approval application for GT. Put the URL there because that shows them exactly how you're handling that in your district. And again, even if you're not using Virtual Arkansas or Arkansas River, that's really good wording to take because again, Candace and Kirsten worked directly with Desi on that to get the wording exactly like they wanted. And those are the people checking the plan. Okay, so they're looking to see that we're using that type of language. ELL, information is there. Again, worked with Desi on that one so that the correct information is there in terms of how it's being handled. Not anything for you to add until you get to the bottom. And again, very similar to dyslexia. How are we going to handle those students if we have a virtual student who requires these services? Who will be the person who will provide those services for them? How will they do that? Think about that dual role again. If I have somebody who's teaching on-site students, but then they're also doing virtual students, how am I making sure that they have time in their schedule for that, time to prepare for that? Again, link to your district ESOL program guide if it's available. And then you can also include that statement. There's a district support link as you begin to work on that. There's something else there. And if you have any questions on that, we're happy to reach out to Trisha Kerr at the department to help us with how she wants that worded. Okay, then going into special education, very similar. Notice that each one of these will start with, referring to those rules and regs. The district is going to ensure that we're doing that. All the information is there in terms of the K-6 and the 712. Pop in the name of your district there. Okay, you've got more information. And then again, at the bottom, you've got a place where you can add in specific information. I would pattern this after how you pattern the dyslexia. How is my SPED teacher going to provide resource services if a student requires that based on their IEP? How will we provide those therapies? Will they be on site? Will we use teletherapy, speech language therapy, anything that could be a possibility? How will we do that? And how will we ensure that district personnel have time in their schedules to be able to do that so that they're not playing that dual role where they're doing on-site students all day long, and then it's up to them to figure out how to handle virtual students. We want to make sure dedicated time in their schedule, dedicated time to prepare for that. If they are seeing kids simultaneously, one kid's in the room, one kid's online, they're doing that together. They still need time to be able to prepare for that digital component to get the materials to that student. Again, link or description of your district plan and how you will deliver SPED services. Okay, and then digital accommodations, these are all there. Anything specific to your district about tools or resources your teachers would have access to, anything that you might be using for any of those specialized supports, dyslexia, special ed, you need to explain that here if those students will be using that, and the accessibility. Rachel, did you have anything you want to add on that one? Okay. Okay, so that's all of our specialized student supports. Now we're into teacher supports, and you've got a question up there. So what support does your district have that virtual teachers could be included in? For example, are you doing any professional development that you could invite the virtual teachers to be a part of? Are there any collaboration sessions? If you've got teachers in there meeting about curriculum and talking about science of reading, proficiency, anything along those lines, that might be something that you would include virtual teachers in as well. You could reach out and say, this might be a great opportunity, because as much as possible, those virtual teachers need to be on the same page with what's going on in the district so that they can customize for your students.
Some other points that I would pull into this is Arch Forward. We have a summer PD page, and we have a whole series of trainings around technology, blended learning, and some virtual learning PD opportunities. You can pull that in, that you're going to require your virtual teachers to go through Arch Forward PD and pull the list and stuff. But if you are a PLC school, you may also want to consider having a PLC meeting group, or however you're doing that, a PLC group for your virtual teachers. And you can also put that here, that's another way you're providing that support to that specific group.
Okay, you've got your K-6 information, your 712 information there. So next one, daily or weekly amount of time teachers will need to develop and plan instruction based on options. Really, the only part you need to think about there is those specialized services like I've talked about with SPED, dyslexia, ELL, and put those in those specific boxes. But again, you can add in anything here that you think might help to increase collaboration with virtual teachers in terms of essential standards, anything that you might do there to provide for those teachers. Okay, next part, last part is district supports. Equity plan. So this is one you can just add a link here, a URL to your equity plan, or a statement that addresses equity. access to our students experiencing poverty, homeless, migrant, foster care, military connected, etc. So linking that equity plan in there is probably the easiest way to do that.
Julie, one thing that I want to point out also is that they've said that the system that we have to put this content, that we have to put the plan into, you're going to copy and paste this into. If you're savvy like me and you like highlight words and you have a link there, it doesn't work that way. You actually have to copy and paste in what's called the full URL, which would look like this. I'm going to pop it in the chat. So like that would be the link to the Archboard website. And so that's the full URL. So anything you link to, you need to just take that address and put it in because it won't actually link it in the plan once you submit it.
Okay. Communication, all students are expected to test statewide summative assessment. So just like you're doing right now, I know you're in the thick of testing. You have to think about how are we going to plan for those students coming on site, because we know they have to be administered on site. Whatever you're doing there, I would reference that in here and how you will go about meeting the needs of those students. K-6 information is there, 712 information is there. I will tell you that one of the areas we got some feedback on is what will you do if students don't come for testing? And so you may want to include a statement about following the DESE guidelines, separate cohorts that we would utilize. If it's a health issue that, we can test that student at a separate time, not during the regular school week when there are many students there. However you can do that, I would just, whatever you guys are willing to do in terms of helping to support those students to test. We know there's only so much that you can do, but just knowing that you have a plan and you're willing to be very flexible using that flexibility that DESE has provided with state testing. Okay, how you will monitor the effectiveness of your digital option. You've got all the information there for K-6 and 712. The other part that you may want to think about there is any district specific things that you might do to be able to do that, including even stakeholder feedback. That's one area that we've looked at. And so just being continuous in checking to see where your stakeholders are in terms of how effective is this option. If you choose to do those formative assessments and you have those students who are virtual, participate in the on-site formative assessments, or they're taking the same assessments, you could add that in as well. But they're just looking to see how you are monitoring that. Here's stakeholder feedback again. You can add your information there about how you're going to communicate with your virtual students and families, and how you will continue to gain feedback from them as well is important. All the other information is already there. And then we get to the end, and this is just where you're linking. You're putting those URLs for school board approval of your waiver request. It does need to be done before you submit on May the 1st. So that's something to be looking at in the next week or two of getting that approval. Always, we're telling people get approval with stipulations that we know that this is going to put us in a feedback loop. Chances are this plan will come back to us. We'll have a couple of things that we'll need to clear up and give more information on. But just knowing that that's in your board minutes as well, that they're aware that this will be, what you're going to present to them is not the final plan. This is the plan we're submitting to the state, and there is a high possibility that we'll do some revisions and some feedback on that. And then just linking in your policies, you have a little bit of information there from Virtual Arkansas, but it's really just about you linking your own statements there. Okay. Lots of information. That's the plan. So any questions that you have, Rachel, will you go ahead and share that template for them so that they have that in the chat? And we will share this out in email as well for everybody. Okay. Well, if there are no questions that you have, we are here. Please feel free to reach out. We are here to help you and support you through this process.
I have a quick question. I was just waiting to see if anybody else had questions. Okay. You've already provided me feedback multiple times, and I'm very thankful. And our document is now up to 25 pages in length. So did the revisions that you've made to your template, do those stand out? Otherwise, I'm just going to put them side by side and look for changes at this point.
I will say that in the new template that we have, the one thing that I would really look for is if you put them side by side, I would just look to see if you're covering all those things that are in this template, because Desi's looked at the template a couple of times. So if you see that we've explained something and you don't have that, I would add that to it. In some ways, I feel like they've simplified a little bit. They have gotten very clear on what they're looking for. So whichever way you go, I would just make sure that that information that you see on the template that we're providing is there in some way. Like I said, if it's not in this box or that box, that's okay. Because I know, Laura, with yours, you guys have it in every single box, the special populations. It's fine to leave that there. Okay, just make sure that it is also in that dyslexia box. It is also in that special ed box, because there are 18 people looking at these plans and those teams are popping in. Some are only looking at specific questions. Some are doing the full plan. Okay. So it doesn't have to be exactly like ours is. Does that help?
Yes, I just didn't know how far away we are at this point, if we need to like redo each section or just make sure that in general it's covered in the same manner, I guess.
Yep. You make sure it's covered. The only other thing I would look at, for those of you who were using the Archford K-6 virtual template, make sure that you're looking carefully at the Arkansas River information and it matches, because as they've had to go back and make some revisions to their plan, some of those things have changed. For anybody who's already got a plan that's filled out for Archford virtual K-6, if you want us to go in and pop that Arkansas River information in for you, we are happy to do that. Because that's on us, that we gave you a template that then the program changed. So we are happy to do that if that will alleviate some of the work for you. However, we can do that, any of that copy and pasting, moving things around, we are happy to do that to help you.
Yeah, please let us submit the Arkansas River plan, because that has been worked on by multiple people around the state and looked at by people that we want to look at that. And so we want to give you the best chance possible. So please let us go in and replace any of the Archford K-6 information with this Arkansas River, because the Arkansas River is more robust and more complete. You're going to have a better chance with it.
And all of that is in this that you're going to share with us after the Zoom. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Thank you for all your help.
Yep, you're welcome. Any other questions?
Thank you, ladies. Appreciate it.
You are welcome.
Thank you.
When you guys get ready to submit, if you are unsure where to do that, we will send you that link. It is on the April updates. It's the fourth bullet that says superintendents go here. And it has to be the superintendent who initially logs in. You log in, if you want to designate someone else to do that, you're going to be able to do that. But it does have to be the superintendent first. You can't just say, go log in here and do that. It has to be superintendent's login to get you access to that system. But we're happy to give you that link if you need it.
I started doing that yesterday and I couldn't figure out how to make my hyperlink be a link. So in mine, it just looks like a web address.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
fine.
That's what it's going to look like.
That's how you
Yeah.
have to submit it. Yes.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
I was trying to be high tech and it looks a little low tech, but that's okay.
Yeah, it's okay. We talked to them about that and they said, we can't do that right now. I'm like, okay, that's fine. We'll just go with the old URLs. They're kind of ugly, but it's all good. Okay. All right. Well, reach out to us. If you need anything, let us know. We are here to help you guys. Just be sure you submit by May the 1st. Something good, bad, or ugly, submit it because it'll get you on the radar and then we can fix it from there. I think y'all are going to be perfect. We're excited. Our first one to get feedback actually had very little feedback. So that was woohoo. Lots of work, but we feel like we're on the right track.
Thank you.